Hello there everybody, this is Alex from Hardcoring Guides, being my guide for Dead Space 2 on Zealot difficulty. Today we are doing Chapter 14 entitled New Marker... No, hold on. Was it Marker, Access, and a New Threat? Ah, the hell, I can't remember the name of it. I don't care enough. So anyway, yeah, we're finally in Chapter 14. This is about a 10-ish minute chapter. It's really short in comparison to a lot of chapters. And this was the chapter that I was talking about last time that's going to have the regenerator popping up. And as you see here, I usually just use stasis and then just stomp him until at least 3 to 4 of his limbs are gone. And then after that, I just use stasis again. I just waste all of my stasis to make sure that he stays down so that way I can work with the circuitry. So the regenerator is not... I wouldn't say he's that big of a threat as he was in, say, Dead Space 1. Mainly because... I don't know, I just feel like the areas that you're going through are a lot easier to deal with, and plus, there's plenty of stasis to go around. You have stasis recharge that happens. If you upgrade to your stasis, you should have, like, faster recharge stuff, I'm pretty sure. And then on top of that, you know, if you have a couple of stasis packs on you, then there you go. So, typically the idea is, if you see him, and he's just getting in the way, use stasis, stomp him out, or just blow up his limbs, one of the two. I mean, basically try to knock off his limbs. Because the idea is, when you knock off his limbs, he's going to have to regrow them back. So, it doesn't really matter how many limbs you knock off. I think eventually he's going to have to want to regrow them. Now, if you don't knock off his arms, he will crawl toward you for like a little bit. And then after a while, he'll probably end up just giving up and trying to regenerate. Because I believe he's got like a timer thing. I don't think he wants to do it himself. I think the game just makes him do it. So, yeah. Anyway, coming into here, there's going to be a puker. This is probably the toughest area for this chapter, I would say. This is probably definitely one of the more difficult ones. Mainly because of the fact that you have a ton of enemies that you're going to have to deal with. And by a ton, I mean like 5 or 6, but, you know, it's still enough. Especially in a small room. Now, real quick, don't be like me and do not forget to grab that body over there. Because I completely didn't realize at the time that I needed that corpse. So make sure that that guy over there in that middle of that bridge is something you grab. So for the explosive barrels, I recommend actually not doing what I'm doing and just blowing him up. You can do it if you want, but you can always just save the explosives for something that's a little bit more threatening than, say, the regenerator itself. And, you know, save some of these spikes and such for other enemies. Typically, again, the idea is, of course, just chop off the regenerator's legs. You should take you about 2 shots of the plasma cutter with full upgrades by this point. Chop off his legs, and then just use stasis and let him sit there for a bit. Basically, just treat him like he's a dog that just pissed on the carpet and make sure that you rub his nose on it, you know what I mean? So, just, if he gets back up, you know, knock him back down again, pretty much. Stasis, knock him back down, and there you go. And then whenever a room is cleared of enemies and such, just use stasis on him once again if you wanted to. And then just run up the door. Because the thing is, when you run out of door, he can't go through doors. Enemies can't go through doors. They have to basically despawn, and then they have to despawn first, and then they have to respawn out of like another vent, you know, later on, which he's gonna do here. And a lot of these areas are relatively scripted too, like right there, for instance. That's practically just a scripted area that he's gonna have to jump through. And also, do keep in mind that there is there's a plethora of checkpoints, I should say, for this chapter. So even if you were to die in like a specific new area, you typically would probably start that new area over from like the doorway, or at least a door behind. So like for here, for instance, you know, you get through this door, you go through the elevator, most likely you'll probably be safe, you know, with the checkpoint. I don't think you'll have to start all this over again, so at least you shouldn't have to. Especially for Chapter 15, when you're doing the whole running away, and you're basically doing, you know, running around this marker tower thing as well. So basically, the thing with these fights is just knowing where the enemies are going to come from, knowing who you're going to have to deal with, and then essentially, you know, when you are having to be forced to deal with the regenerator, you take matters in your own hand, and you just use stasis on everybody, or just even him, or whatever, and just, you know, wipe the floor with pretty much everybody and just get rid of them. The next chapter, though, is going to be potentially, I would say, one of the more harder chapters, only because of the fact that you have to go through so many enemies to deal with, not just the regenerator. So there's that. Now, when you come into this room, I would suggest just knocking the regenerator out while you're in that room that we were just in. Knock his leg, just knock a leg off and just let him, you know, regenerate while he's there. And then take on these guys, you know, from the other room. So you don't have to deal with the regenerator getting, you know, in the way too often. And there's going to be a couple of those guys that spawn enemies that are going to, you know, bring corpses back to life. So make sure that you make those priority targets and just wipe them out. There's like 2, maybe 3, possibly. So just keep your eye out for them and deal with them first. That way you don't have to deal with a ton more enemies. Now, granted, if you wanted to potentially get more credits, you know, I guess, but you're wasting ammo on other corpses that don't really need to be there. So you're getting extra, you might be getting extra items, but you're still wasting the ammo to do it, so, yeah. And, again, you know, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but freezing them in time, because I don't want to use the word that I've been using for the past 15 minutes now, because it's getting old to say it. But, you know, slowing the enemies down constantly here is going to be a big help, and especially a big help in Chapter 15. So if you're not doing a no upgrade run, then have stasis at least a decent amount of upgrades on it, and then of course, if you're running what I'm running, where you're running like 2 guns only, that of course make sure that those guns are at least, make sure plasma cutter, if you're running plasma cutter, is fully upgraded. Make sure your primary is fully upgraded by this point, and make sure that your secondary has a decent amount of damage on it. You don't really need to worry about all the other things, depending on the gun, though. If you're running line gun, I would suggest upgrading reload speed as fast as you humanly can. And especially probably the rate of fire for, I would say, force gun and line gun. Mainly because those guns kind of suffer from having very big reloads and just very not so nice dispersed shots between each other. It takes a while to fire off another line gun shot, and that usually gets me killed, so I never play line gun anymore. It's just a thing I don't do. I've never really been a fan of line gun. I remember when I originally played Dead Space, you know, back, you know, when I was younger, back in the day, I remember thinking of the line gun was going to be like a really cool shotgun type thing, but then it turned out to be more like a wide shotgun. Not even like a wide, not like a wide shotgun, but like a wide shot gun. So, yeah, there's a space after shot there. And it necessarily wasn't bad, I just never really liked it. And for a while, I didn't even like the Ripper until, I would say, Dead Space Remake, when I kind of discovered that it had some use. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could play that in Dead Space 1 and try that out. And, yeah, it worked pretty well. So, I think every gun has its use, of course, and I think that's a big contributor to why I probably like Dead Space 4, because I think everything just works. It's almost the same concept as BioShock, where a lot of the guns just work really well. But, you know, to me personally, I feel like I'm not a big fan of the crossbow that often, and I'm not a fan of the flamethrower. And I end up using the wrench in BioShock way more often than not. So, and that's another fun comparison to Dead Space as well, is Dead Space has a lot of good comparisons, I would say, to BioShock for me. Just, you know, the space you're in feels like BioShock-y. But then again, I guess you could say, well, BioShock is a survival horror, so it takes elements of, like, Resident Evil, which Dead Space does as well, so yeah, kind of flip-flops between them. But I like BioShock a lot. I like Resident Evil as well, but yeah. And I love Dead Space. So, anyway, that's it for this chapter. Get ready, prepare. If this is your last time to prepare, I believe so. And just buy whatever you can. And then after that, we're going to head out to Chapter 15. So, as always, take care, everybody.